and welcome to That's Absurd. Please elaborate. This is a podcast that sometimes we talk about science and sometimes make people laugh. Maybe it's only ourselves. I don't know. Maybe we'll make you laugh too. I don't know. My name is Trace Dominguez, and on this show, we answer questions from you, and we try and find science that supports them. And this week, we have a guest, Dr. Rohin Francis. He is a cardiologist in the UK. He is a YouTuber with Medlife Crisis as his channel. Hello, Rohin.
Hello, Trace. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you? Did you save anybody's life today?
Well, that always sounds a bit grandiose, but but I was in the operating theater all day today from 3 a.m. to 5 o'clock. So I'm kind of delirious. So which I think bodes well for this kind of podcast.
Yeah, I would say our podcast is, what is it? Chaotic neutral, chaotic positive? I don't know what
I've never really understood the classification, but chaotic is self-explanatory, I think.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Yes, definitely the chaotic part. If this is your first time listener, thank you for being here and thanks for listening to our show. Again, we answer questions from the audience, and this week we have 2 questions, and we will both answer them, and we'll use our science communication skills as best as we can to try and do that. If you want to submit a question, you can go down into the show notes and do that. There are emails down there. There's a website, that'sabsurdshow.com/ask. You can even call us on the phone at 302-TAPE-SHOW, 302-TAPESHO. You can join our Patreon. You can join Nebula and listen to these podcasts ad-free and support the show that way. There are all sorts of different things down in the show notes. You can also find ways to find Rohin, because I'll make sure and put those in there as well. But let's just get started. I'm going to go first, Rohin, because you've never been on the show before. And so I'll go first this week. And this week we've got a question from Buena from Reno, who actually used our phone number and called us and left us a voicemail. Let's listen.
Hi, this is Buena from Reno. My question is, must we know a negative thing to understand the positive? Like, do we need to experience bitterness to understand sweetness, or sadness to understand happiness, or hate to understand love? Is it enough to just know of the concept? What inspired me was the robot episode, the one where someone asked, can a robot love? Oh, wait, ChatGPT asked that. Anyway, have a great day. Thank you.
Nice. This is a deep question, you know?
Yeah. You can take it in a few different ways, can't you?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Rohin, how does this make you feel? Like, do you have like an instinct on this one?
My instinct is no. I don't think you need to experience a negative. I think you can understand the concept because does everything have a negative or a positive? You know, that like the bitterness, is that the opposite of sweetness? Some would say sourness, you know. So what is, and I think you can enjoy something without having to experience sadness. So, you know, I think I'm intrigued to see how you interpret this, because I think it could go in many directions.
Yeah, for sure. I liked this question because it was science plus kind of philosophical, thoughtful, you know, exploration. There's no real answer to these questions sometimes. And this is one of those where, Buena, you can take this however you want, but there's not a real solid answer for this. But I'm going to use a lot of examples, and I'm going to talk through kind of what we know about the negative versus the positive in our world. So I now don't live there, but I lived in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Michigan. In Michigan, the weather is cold, about at least 4 or 5 months of the year. And we do not see the sun in February at all. It just doesn't happen. And then I moved out of Michigan and I saw sun for the first time in February, and it like struck me. I was just like, whoa. But when I moved to LA, if it got cloudy one day, everybody was like, ugh, it's so cloudy and gloomy. Like literally one day of gloom.
Isn't that just what you're accustomed to? So, you know, isn't that a slightly different thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you need those rainy days to appreciate those sunny days is kind of what I'm going with. If you're accustomed to a sunny day and then it rains for, say, like a week, or, well, this year in LA, it rained for almost like 3-4 weeks in a row, and all the Los Angelinos got pretty good at driving in the rain. I was surprised by that. But then they really appreciated it when it got back to being sunny again, which I thought was pretty cool. And on its face seems to make sense, right? You have to understand this negative thing to understand the positive, negative being rain, positive being sun, although there's not inherently negativity associated with those. It's usually associated in other ways. Sunny days aren't necessarily positive, although if you're a Los Angelino, it might be, right?
True. Some people like gloomy. Actually, my wife, her favorite weather is kind of overcast gray sky. She
really?
Seems to really like it. Yeah. So
that's so nice. So cozy. You just curl up.
I don't know. I like the sun.
little Huguet kind of, northern Europe.
Yeah.
So I spent a while and I started looking up things like the bitterness and the sweetness I really gravitated to as well. And so I started looking up like paragusia. I don't know how to say it. Hypogusia, dysgusia, which is like you have problems with your taste. Figuring a lot of science when you're trying to learn something about how it works. You look at the thing that's broken. You look at the thing that's different. You look at the outlier to try and understand the kind of baseline or the norm, right? So you're saying, oh, this person cannot taste bitterness maybe, or cannot taste sweetness. So do they have heightened senses in these other ways? Do they appreciate sweetness? But I couldn't really find anything good. And then I thought, maybe I'm just taking this too literally. So I thought, maybe this is really about perspective, And as you, I think, very astutely mentioned, Rohin, right at the top, there aren't always opposites for things. The English language, for example, disheveled, great word. You can't be shoveled. You're not shoveled.
But you can be gruntled.
You can be?
Yes. Yeah, that is a word. So
what?
I think, some of these words without opposites had opposites that just got lost to time. But yes, I take your point. Yeah. I thought you were going to say, what is the opposite of the English language? Which is a hard question. Maybe any language that makes sense and is regular.
Well, you said it, not me. The disheveled and having no such thing as shoveled is called an unpaired word. And disheveled being a quote unquote negative term means that it's called an orphaned negative, which I thought was kind of cool. It has a negative prefix with a word behind it, but removing the prefix or flipping it results in not a word. So it's an orphaned negative. One of my favorites has always been underwhelmed or overwhelmed. So like whelmed.
Yeah.
There's not whelmed isn't really a word, although I did use it in a thumbnail once on YouTube to see if people responded to it.
Did it work? Were they whelmed? Really.
I'm terrible at thumbnails, so there's actually a whole list of unpaired words on Wikipedia. Awful is one. So
I guess
unpaired,
that's
there's no aw-less, I guess.
But there is awesome. But that's
there is awesome.
Yeah. This is what I mean about English. See what I mean?
Yeah. The explanation is a lot of these come from, other languages that have been adopted, or some come from Latin and some come from German and some, and so like nonchalant clearly does not come from, it comes probably from French or something like that. And there's no such thing as chalant. You can't be nonchalant and then also chalant. What would that be? I guess just very genuine. I don't know. Like a little in your face. There's irritate. I don't know. They said ritate would be the opposite.
Like irradiate and irritate, irritate.
Yeah.
I'm going to use these words now. All of the ones you're mentioning, I'm going to start employing them in daily speech. Yeah.
You're going to make them
just
paired
whelm
words.
all of my audiences.
So whelmed. And then my favorite actually that I wrote was disgruntled and gruntled, although gruntled again is a word from 1938 apparently.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing is, and to Buena's question, right? We understand what gruntled should be, even though nobody has ever experienced gruntled. We know what disgruntled is. And if you were to say, take away the dis and add gruntled and just say that, you would be like, oh, I understand the concept of that, and I can probably guess what that means. And so I thought that was a kind of neat way to sideways our way into this conversation. In her voicemail, Buena focused on like emotions and feelings, which I thought was interesting because there is a lot of positive and negative connotation to those. Do you have any guesses as to why?
You mean coming at it from an emotional perspective?
Yeah, like saying hate versus love, or like happiness versus sadness. There's a lot of that, like, oh, these are opposites, but I don't know. I
guess maybe those ones are familiar because I guess they are so universal to the human experience. We all understand, I think, that you can't really exist as an adult, at least, without experiencing highs and lows. And so maybe coming back to your point about appreciating things, we can all understand the concept that after hardship, you can appreciate good things and vice versa. So, I guess that speaks to a sort of universal experience that we can all kind of relate to.
Yeah. We both have kids. Did you think before you had kids, you would watch a movie and somebody's kid would be kidnapped or something, common. And I would always think of it, I could academically associate with that. Like, oh, that's awful. That kid got kidnapped, that Liam Neeson's he's going to angry. I get it. He's angry. Understand. She was taken. But now I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah. It's like a completely different kind of order of magnitude of emotion now.
Yeah. But what is that? Is that the kind of theme we're talking? Is that something like empathy?
Yeah.
So is that, go on. I mean, you tell me.
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's related to sort of a state of not having a child. I feel like that's a different kind of feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's going from sympathy to empathy, maybe, to your point, right? If I've never had a child and I see a child get kidnapped on a television show and I can feel sympathy for Liam Neeson's, but I don't feel empathy for his loss until I can experience it myself. That sort of touches on her, can you understand the concept, right? Like if I'm sympathizing, I'm understanding the concept. But if I've experienced that loss or sadness or whatever, then it's more clear. I looked up some psychology studies to talk a little bit about the opposite feelings, right? So if you have negative emotions versus positive emotions, so sadness would be considered a negative emotion. Hate would be a negative emotion. I don't think I really need to state that. Like,
we've all seen Inside Out.
Positive emotion. Yeah, exactly. We've all seen Inside Out. Great documentary. Everybody should watch it. But
Inside Out 2 is the highest grossing animated film of all time. Did you know that?
I did. It just hit highest grossing last week or something.
That's wild.
I did see it in the theater. It was a date night. Me too. And my mother-in-law watched the kiddo, and we went to a kids movie in a theater filled with a lot of children. And I was like, well, that's fine. We're parents now.
We went to a cinema in India, which had a slide and a ball pit in the cinema hall.
Whoa.
It's just for kids movies. And
that's awesome.
It's wild. It's one of the best cinemas I've ever been to.
That's so cool. Man, there's a place called the Alamo here in the U.S. that has something called Alamo for All, which is they leave the lights on and they'll play the movie, but they don't expect everybody to be quiet. And it's the idea is for kids. And that's the closest to that I've ever seen. Meanwhile, in the U.S., we're like, I want a kid-free flight, a kid-free restaurant. I never want to have to see a kid.
I've seen those people on Twitter, yeah.
Yeah, they live there. And I really I would go to a movie theater with a slide and a ball pit just for me.
And don't even get me started on the food options.
Was it good?
Oh my God. You can get everything. Absolutely everything in the cinema. Yeah, wild.
I'm going to book a flight. I can understand the concept of that without having experienced the opposite. For sure. I guess I have experienced the opposite. But
yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
The boring American cinemas.
To go back to negative and positive emotions, if you're feeling negative emotions, you want to feel positive emotions, right? When your kid is feeling a negative emotion, many parents try and make them feel happy. Like they want them to not experience that. They want them to feel, again, kind of the opposite way. If just a kid is sad or angry, a lot of people want them to feel happy. For example, my kid fell down playing in the street this week. He hit his face. It was minor. He was fine 5 minutes later. But while he was upset, those 5 minutes, he needed comfort. But my mother-in-law immediately asked if we could give him ice cream. As soon as he fell down, he'd gotten up, he started crying. And she's like, can I go get him ice cream? And I'm like, no, he needs to live with this negative emotion to really be able. I don't want him to associate being hurt with getting ice cream. I want him to be able to manage this feeling. And then we'll give him ice cream. After that, that's fine. He'll be okay. He's not broken. He just needs to work through this. And, I'm sure not every parent's the same. That's just how we feel. But learning to live with those emotions is important and not just dismissing and dispelling them, which again kind of makes me realize I'm sort of talking again about experiencing the negative emotion or experiencing a similar emotion and not an opposite emotion.
I think there are a lot of theories about, what degree of emotions we should allow kids to experience. And, we shouldn't wrap them up in cotton wool and prevent them from experiencing any hardship because then they won't be able to deal with it later on. But it also makes me think of this kind of two-phase pattern of, this is a long time ago, so I'm rusty and I apologize to any psychiatrists or psychologists listening, but in psychiatry, obviously the bipolar disorder is a classic example of this kind of opposite, clear opposite states where you have manic phases and you have depressive episodes. And a lot of the medication seeks to keep people in this euthymic state, which is neither the highs or the lows. But and you can have patterns which are predominantly more one or the other, but it does kind of make, what we're talking about in terms of this is taking things to the extreme, that when you speak to people who suffer from bipolar disorder, they really, do contrast the two states as almost, being total opposites. And I don't know if that really adds to our point about whether you need one or the other, but it certainly, when you're talking about emotion, kind of made me think along those lines. Yeah,
for sure. I think I'm trying to figure out a way to explain whether or not these are opposites, right? Are they opposites? We have hate and love, for example. We usually present them as opposites, right? Pop culture, you would say hate and love are the opposite, but they're both valid feelings. You can feel both of those, and both of them are considered totally valid ways to feel.
Yeah.
Does that make them opposite? I don't know.
And so often they go together, right? I mean, we talk about love-hate relationships and that kind 100%. Of thing. So they are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. I mean, same with bitterness and sweetness, or sweet and savory are also often considered opposites in flavor. And some of the best stuff is a mix of both of those things. And sadness and happiness, even the documentary Inside Out and Inside Out 2 discuss that, where it's like the little core memories are both yellow and blue, and that's okay. And so are they, I don't know. That's something that I kind of wrote down in my research is I think what Buena is saying is, do we need to know a negative to understand a positive? And I think she's coming at it from a place of like mathematics and physics, right? Where there are some things that are, a -1 and a 1 are considered opposites on a number line. But does that exist outside of this abstraction? I don't know, which I think is kind of neat and complicated.
Yeah.
Philosophers have this idea dating back to ancient Greece. It's called the unity of opposites. And I'm not a philosopher, so apologies to any philosophers, though I do find it fascinating. When I listen to people talk about philosophy, which doesn't happen often, but it's very similar to when you listen to people who are super into indie music, right? And they're just like, they're sitting around, they're on couches somewhere in kind of a dim room, and they're just using like these band names that none of them sound real. They're just like, oh, yo, have you seen Cinderblock, like coloring book? And I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And like the philosophers are doing that, but with all of these different philosophy terms, ancient philosophers, modern philosophers, classical philosophers. And they're just like, oh, yes, Heidelberg's postulation. And you're just like, what are you talking about?
I mean,
who is that?
That's an indie band.
Heidelberg postulation, definitely. That's funny. So I looked it up on Wikipedia to this unity of opposites, and it's based on the notion of non-duality, essentially saying that opposites don't actually exist. When an object moves from point A to point B, the change exists, but the underlying law remains the same. It's this, you moved, but it didn't. You're not actually an opposite, even if you move from A to B or from B to A. That might appear to be an opposite, but the laws that function that movement all stay the same. And they're only opposite relative to ourselves and our observations.
Okay, I'm going to just pretend I understood that.
Look, exactly. I wrote in my notes one paragraph of philosophy and I already feel broken. Like I have no idea.
I mean, I think what people are going to take away from this is that you and I, our understanding of psychology comes from Inside Out. And our understanding of philosophy comes from TikTok and YouTube.
And Wikipedia, don't forget. Scientific American wrote a piece about negative thoughts versus positive thoughts and kind of talking about them a little bit. So that really gets to the heart of what Buena's asking. And so one psychologist, Dr. Jonathan Adler, he worked with Hal Hirschfeld, who's a marketing professor at New York University, NYU, and they looked at patients undergoing psychotherapy. And I want to put out there, this is a self-reported questionnaire, so take that as you will. It's not the best method, but it's a pretty standard method in psychological and psychotherapy study. And they wanted to assess their well-being. So they had them assess how they were doing on a numbers, like a number scale. It called ordinal. And then they had narratives about their life as well. So these kind of like qualitative measures. And then they coded all of that and statisticized it out and found that people, quote, felt sad because of everything that they'd been through, but now they felt happy and hopeful because they're doing the work. And this was people who were undergoing psychotherapy actively, and it was people who were experiencing alcohol abuse or drug abuse and addiction. Another study from the University of New South Wales by Richard Bryant came out in 2011, was a sleep study. and they asked people to try and suppress an unwanted thought. And then they asked other participants to not suppress an unwanted thought right before they went to sleep. And so an example of that is, you're laying in bed and I don't know, you're thinking about your day, or, maybe you had relationship drama that day, or some just generalized fear that you're experiencing, or money problems, something specific. This is the stuff that they listed in their study. And do you think that the people who suppressed the thoughts or didn't suppress the thoughts had worse nightmares?
The people who suppressed the thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so people who weren't accepting of their kind of opposite emotion, they were trying to stay positive, but they didn't accept the negative and thus actually dwelled more on the negative. Mm-hmm. Another study in Queensland, also in Australia, a lot of interesting Australian studies. David Kavanagh in 2009, people also in treatment for abuse of alcohol, they had a self-reported questionnaire where they talked about cravings and urges, and people who said that they had attempted to suppress intrusive thoughts about their cravings actually reported more intrusive thoughts than people who accepted them. Florida State study did the same, talked about heart rate, and actually had this like quantitative measure of heart rate, and there was a higher stress response.
That's talking my language.
From alcohol-related cues. Really interesting stuff. But essentially, this kind of comes back to, they're not really opposites, but the way that Buena is presenting them as opposites, you can experience both, but it'd be better to like accept both and not pretend that one isn't real or to ignore it because you consider it negative. If you can accept both of them, it's going to be better for you health-wise. Science is pretty clear about that. But I kind of want to push back on Buena and say, are these opposites? Because some things don't have opposites, which we've gotten there 25 minutes later, but that's what Rohin said right at the top. Is this opposites? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because like nothing is not a thing, but you would say, what's the opposite of everything? Nothing.
Right.
But nothing is not definable. It's not measurable. So you can't like make a scientific study about nothing because it's nothing.
I mean, I think, the emotions are messy. So I think, this is much more philosophy and psychology. But yeah, I can speak from experience that, 10 years ago or so, I was going through some like rough times. And it was only when I really kind of confronted it. And, this is, I think, common sense. And accepted that as you were suggesting from those studies and dealt with it. And then since then, I enjoyed a kind of happiness that I had never previously experienced in, my 30 years prior to that. And it really, it was like a turning point in my life. Like I really it was like a whole new phase. So
wow,
I think that is a emotional example. Certainly from personal perspective, I can certainly testify that experiencing and dealing with and accepting that negative has unlocked a whole new positive, which I wouldn't have experienced. I would have just kind of sleepwalked along without experiencing.
Huh.
So yeah. So maybe that's a nice positive way to put a spin on things.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. To the spirit of Buena's question, if we were to find something that was an opposite, I think that puts a nice close on the emotional part of this. But, she listed hate and love, and she listed bitterness and sweet. And those are all kind of the same things. They kind of live in the same area. But there are things in the universe that are opposites. I mentioned negative numbers. Do you know anything about the concept of zero?
I'm Indian. Of course.
So this is like they teach you in school. I wondered about that, but I didn't want to assume,
yeah, we're very proud of nothing. No, I mean, we are very proud of zero. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Just thank you for zero. As a Puerto Rican, I don't know what we use it for, but thank you for the zero. So for the audience, zero has a very long and very interesting history. And in the 7th century AD or CE in India, a mathematician, Brahmagupta, showed that subtracting a number from itself equaled zero, and that zero was in fact a number. Interesting, zero is an even number, which that was kind of cool. But zero as an idea, concept, had been around for a while. Sumerians used like essentially spreadsheets, they'd call them that, but like ledgers to track all sorts of different things in their society. This was 4000 BCE. Yes, mostly taxes.
Mostly tax, yeah.
Yeah. And they had empty columns. They just left them empty, and that would be a zero. The first symbol to be a zero is in the 3rd century BCE, the Babylonians, who used base 60 math. Shout out to episode 20. Definitely go back and listen to that. They used a zero-like symbol, which is kind of cool. They had all sorts of really cool math stuff. But anyway, yeah, it was first thought of as a number, thanks to Brahmagupta, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then mathematician Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi created algebra and used zero in that, and that was in the 10th century CE. So pretty cool. And that's important. The reason I bring it up is because that is the center. So you have opposites on either side of zero. Without zero, the number line would go from -1 to 1. It wouldn't necessarily feel like it was an opposite. Right. But no zero means no calculus, no fractions, no algebra. Without zeros, you couldn't represent orders of magnitude particularly easily. Cognitive scientist Andreas Nader at the University of Tübingen in Germany told Vox that discovering zero was equivalent to us learning language in terms of sheer importance.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, which is pretty interesting. And a Harvard math professor, Robert Kaplan, wrote an entire book on zero, and in that same Vox piece said, imagine a box with nothing in it. Mathematicians call this empty box the empty set, a physical representation of zero. There is nothing inside of the box. But now take a second empty box, like you just got a bunch of Amazon stuff and you took the second box that's also empty and you stacked it inside the first empty box. How many things are in the first box?
In the bigger box.
In the bigger box.
Well, I mean, now there's a box inside the box.
Yeah, there's an object in it, even though they're both empty. So they're both zero. But within there are there's now a zero. And that means that it's important, even though it contains nothing. And I was like, wow, math is wild.
Yeah, I'm filing under the category of things I'm pretending to understand. Philosophy, psychology, maths. How much smaller do you want to make my intellect appear today? I'm just one thing after another.
Wait till you get to your answer, and then I'm going to feel like the idiot. So that's fine. So there's zero, there's positive numbers, there's negative numbers. We obviously just mentioned that negative numbers are important for like accounting and finance, but also for coordinate systems. So you do need the positive to understand the negative in a coordinate system. Have you ever heard of Null Island?
Don't think I have.
It's the spot on the Earth at 0 north, 0 east, 0 south, 0 west. It is off of the coast of Africa. Kind of if you drew a line from the end of African continent and the middle of sub-Saharan Africa out into the ocean, where they crossed roughly is going to be Null Island. Sometimes you see it in pictures where where was this picture taken? And it was taken in the middle of the ocean off the coast of Africa. That's not right. But that's Null Island. It essentially means it didn't have any GPS data, so it put 0, which is kind of cool. But it means that in order to understand this coordinate system, you need to understand positives and negatives because you have to move left and right, up and down from that 0 point, which is cool. So without negative numbers, i.e. opposites, you wouldn't be able to have a coordinate system. You wouldn't be able to track deficits and taxes and all sorts of other things, which is kind of cool. So from a physics perspective, negative numbers are important, but not actually as important as you might think. We treat them all as negative numbers when we're talking about them, but in math, it's essentially the same. You treat them just as an integer, which is cool. But also are examples of opposites in perception, just to kind of round it out and talk a little bit more about opposites. Black and white. I think we can understand the concept of black. You can understand the concept of night if you've seen only 24-hour daylight. I think you can still understand it because it's like there, but it might be more difficult. We might have nailed it kind of in the middle when we talked about sympathy versus empathy, which isn't even in my notes, but it's like, sure, you can understand the concept of, hot and cold are considered opposite.
Yeah, I was gonna mention those actually. I was gonna say that, other true opposites like up and down, left and right, these are things that you've kind of already alluded to. If you had a hypothetical, I'm not thinking of opposite. I was going to go for that old thought experiment of trying to imagine the fourth dimension, and the analogy being if you were a two-dimensional being existing in a two-dimensional world, you couldn't imagine the third dimension because everything is flat. But that's not really an opposite, is it? So I guess this is difficult.
I think maybe where you're touching on is matter, antimatter, right? If you're trying, antimatter exists. It's real. We don't have it around us because that would be bad for us and it would annihilate. But
we've just proven that you don't need to. We understand antimatter because we understand matter. Yeah, there you go.
It would behave the same as matter. Yeah. It would just be a positron and an antiproton instead of proton and electron. And if they met each other, they would annihilate. But a table made of antimatter would behave like a table. The only thing that is different is the charges, the opposite quote unquote charges within the atomic structure. And
actually, now that you say that,
does that mean they're opposites now? I don't know.
No, I've understood the concept of antimatter as if it comes into contact with matter, it'll, cancel each other out. But now you're saying an antimatter table that behaves like a table. Now that's made it more abstract, because I've never thought about antimatter in the way that as like a physical object. So now I want to see an antimatter table and a matter table come into contact with each other. That is now my life's ambition.
It would be the last thing you see.
Probably would.
It would be pretty interesting. I did a video a long time ago. I've been to the antimatter factory at CERN. It's very interesting. They make it, a few atoms at a time. That is a cool
thing to say.
It's a very cool spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
The best part is it's not even like, oh, we're making antimatter and we built this machine. It's like just the runoff from the Large Hadron Collider. They're like, oh, we take some of the extra and we put it over here and make antimatter with it. And we keep it in this magnetic bottle. And I'm just like, okay, that's amazing.
Yeah, don't waste your food. You just use all the
made
scraps.
all that energy. Yeah. Use it. And so this is kind of comes back to the opposites, but antimatter is considered an opposite, but it behaves the same as matter. It just can't touch matter.
I think this is a great example, I think, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, the bottom line, I think, is we sort of found our way there in the dark.
The opposite of light.
Yeah, the opposite of light, or really the absence of. And so it comes back to perception. Obviously, our brains are designed to make sense of the world through patterns and value judgments based on those patterns and assumptions, and we build a world around us. And so obviously we have things like negative feelings, positive feelings, things we don't want to experience, things we do want to experience. Sweetness gives us reward when we eat it for reasons like it's good for your body to eat some carbohydrates and sugars and things. You need those things. Whereas like bitter comes from poisons and things. It's not that we evolved and said, oh, this bitter stuff is bad. It's more like if you couldn't taste bitter, you would die when you ate that thing. So it was a way to keep us from eating things that we sometimes shouldn't eat. So we created these value judgments to it based on that, but it's not inherently negative. Like kale is bitter. It's not a negative necessarily. It's just a more bitter thing. There are lots of bitter things.
Kale is definitely a negative. Let's be honest.
I lived in California a long time.
You've been brainwashed.
I'm converted. But I think objectively, though, outside of our perceptions and our emotions.
We're assigning, sure.
Yeah, negative and positive are both important. You can understand those things without actually experiencing them, but without them, we'd be in trouble. So definitely both valuable, but without bitter, sweet would still be sweet. Without negative numbers, we wouldn't be able to calculate taxes. Maybe better, I don't know. But describing the objective world would be much more difficult without zeros and negative things. So I don't know. This might be the first time there's no real answer to Buena's question. The answer, must we know a negative thing to understand the positive? When it comes to math, yeah. When it comes to happiness and sadness and sweetness and hate and love, I don't think so. I don't think we need that. So human, no. Physics and math, yes.
Okay, where do you draw the line? Okay, that's a whole separate.
Where do you draw the line? Oh no! Someone asked that question, and we'll try it. Just quote philosophy for 35 minutes. I'll bring a philosopher person on, and they can indie band us for an hour.
What was it? Heidelberg's
postulation.
Heidelberg's postulation. Yeah, these. I'm gonna go to see them next week, actually.
Yeah, I think their opener is a cinder block paint store or whatever. I don't remember. Anyway, let's take a quick break and come back, and then Rohin can make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. Julian, give me your best dinosaur roar.
Oh, God, an asteroid! It's horrible!
Wow, that was not where I expected that to go. We're popping in before the show to tell you about I Know Dino. It's a dinosaur podcast.
We think of those dinosaurs being this thing that's been dead for tens of millions of years. Even so, studying dinosaurs can still teach us stuff that is relevant to the world today.
Yeah, like climate models to help us understand global warming.
Migration patterns of dinosaur lineages, they tell us about Earth's changing continents.
We can also study dinosaur diets, what plants lived then, and maybe what animals and how they interact.
And, this is super cool, many dinosaur injuries, paleopathologies, they're the first known occurrences of diseases.
And they talk about all this kind of stuff on I Know Dino. It comes out every week with new dinosaur stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Like, I hadn't heard of a lot of these, which is pretty cool.
You can find I Know Dino on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts are. And if you found us, you can probably find them. Go check them out.
Hello and welcome back to That's Absurd. Please elaborate. And thanks for listening to our advertisement. If we had one, hopefully we did. If we didn't, go join us on Patreon so that you can help support the show so we can keep making. In the meantime, Rohin's here, and he's not just here to talk to me about whether opposites exist. He also has his own question that he got from a listener. So, Rohin, what question did you answer?
Well, I have chosen a question which I think is, on the surface, seems quite straightforward, but I think there's much more to discuss. And it's from Allyson. And Allyson asks, could you replace all your blood with Kool-Aid? Which, as I said, on the surface, that sounds like it would just be a no. That's not going to work.
Right.
Well, she follows it up with a bit more. So, like the question of how would you die if you were suddenly in space? How long could you live if all your blood was replaced with another fluid? And what fluid would you live the longest on?
So
that's the interesting part. Yeah.
Yeah, that adds so much to it because it's like, I remember something from my childhood where this guy was like, I'm grossed out by blood. So I'm going to replace my blood with, I don't know, I think it was soda pop or something. I can't remember.
wait, from your childhood, as in like a cartoon?
It was like a cartoon or a TV show. I think it was one of those science TV shows where they were trying to teach you about what blood is and why it's important. And so he was like, I think blood's gross. And so we should replace it with this, orange soda or whatever. It wasn't orange soda. I actually don't remember it clear enough to know. I tried to find it.
Maybe you watched the same cartoon as Allyson. Maybe you both subliminally, you drank the Kool-Aid. the two of you. But yes, that's basically, we're going to revisit this cartoon because I'm going to tell you about blood and stuff to begin with.
Love it.
But it's funny that this character you recall was grossed out by blood because I'm the opposite. I think blood is great. In fact, I think it's the only bodily fluid that I can tolerate, which is why I chose cardiology. Because the rest of them are revolting. I want nothing to do with them. And I used to cross-cover lung transplants when I was doing heart transplants. And lung doctors love to look at mucus. They love to smell it, sputum. And the patients thought I'm a lung doctor because I'm doing the ward round. So they just shove their sputum pod in my nose and go, here you go, doc. And you expecting the doctor to be thrilled. And I was always like, no, get it away from me. No. So blood is nice and clean. I can deal with it. It's absolutely fine. And blood is great. I think it's a fascinating tissue. And this is a kind of question or a challenge in medicine that it's played out in every field, is we take something that we understand. We understand what blood is. We understand what a kidney is, what any organ is, and we think, okay, maybe we can try and replace that. Like we can make another version. But time and time again, we come up short. And that is
nature's like,
yeah. I mean, nature's like, it's taken me, millions. If we're talking about mammals, millions of years to evolve this stuff. You're not going to come up with it in a few decades. Well, it's more than a few decades, which is a fascinating aspect to this. There's a very good book I'd recommend called Spare Parts, which is all about the history of transplants and transfusions. And when do you think the first attempted blood transfusion took place? And let me preface this by saying it was spectacularly unsuccessful, of course.
Yeah.
But when do you think?
I would think, I don't know, the 1800s. I once worked at a historic site, as you know, if you've listened to the show, listeners, but we would have reenactors come in, and one of them was a Civil War reenactor who was a doctor in his real life. And he found a reproduction of a medical textbook from the 1850s and 60s. And I read it, and it was wild.
Oh, yeah. They were just making all kinds of nonsense up. I feel like I graduated, 100 years too late. I think that was a golden era. It's like, let's just chop this off. Seems like the right thing to do. Just chop it off. Just forget it. Yeah.
You don't need it. That's fine.
You've got your humors are out of balance, and put some garlic on your leg.
Oh, that makes me think that it was even earlier than like the 1800s. Like
it was in 1492, a year that
nothing else happened that year.
Interesting happened in that year. And it's disputed about whether this is actually true, but Pope Innocent VIII was ailing. I don't know why. I mean, who knows? Some disease which clearly left him deplete of blood. At least that was the understanding at the time. And this is not a happy story, actually. 3 boys had their blood drained and transfused into the Pope, and all 4 of them died.
Oh, no.
So, it wasn't successful. And of course, we all can guess multiple reasons why that might have been the case, because they didn't know about blood groups and all these kinds of things. So I won't dwell on the historical aspect too much, but over the years, there have been attempts, certainly, more the era you were suggesting, the 19th century and things like that, where there, things like compatibility started to be understood a bit better, but attempts were made with goat blood and, into humans, which wasn't successful, beer. And these were, popularized. And I think those are interesting because, of course, that comes closer to Allyson's question, because wine, milk, beer, all of these were tried, and they are, of course, all drinks like Kool-Aid.
Yeah. I don't know why, but for some reason I'm gravitating toward milk being like, it's biological, it's got, junk in it.
I've got it in my notes here. In 19th century New York City, Theodore Gaillard, Thomas enjoyed an unusual level of fame for a gynecologist. The reason was milk.
What?
Between 1873 and 1880, the daring idea of transfusing milk into the body as a substitute for blood was being tested across the United States, and he was one of the most outspoken advocates of the practice.
Wow. Look, you're not from here, but we Americans will do anything with our excess farm products. We'll turn it into fuel to run a car that we shouldn't have bought. We'll put it in your body as blood because we gave the farmers money to make that milk and that corn, dang it. So we're going to put it somewhere.
I think the same thing, or the lack of property, unites all of these different drinks, is that they don't have oxygen carrying capability, right? So that's what we're going to get into. So let's think about what blood is and, why blood is so important. And I'm not a hematologist. In fact, most of my job is about blood going wrong and causing blood clots. And that's what I deal with day to day, and unblocking blood clots. But, I have to have an understanding of how blood works, of course, because my job's all about flow of blood and things. So blood is comprised of 4 main components.
Yeah.
White cells, which we all understand, part of the immune system, important for defending us against infections, and platelets, which are to do with clotting. And we're going to ignore those because Allyson's question was, what would happen if you replaced your blood with Kool-Aid? And, you could question how that happens. Is it a gradual process? But in my head, it's a sudden replacement.
Yeah. It's
bland.
A switch. We get Aaron Aronson. You know Aaron Aronson, of course.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
And
the guy who lives in a mud hut with 3 sticks. Aaron Aronson. We always do a fake British accent with him. And you flip a switch, and poor Aaron now has whatever fluid you decide.
Exactly. So, we don't get Kool-Aid in the UK. So I of course know it from the Jonestown massacre. That's my whole understanding of Kool-Aid. But I had to look up the chemical constituents of Kool-Aid. But I think for the purposes that, it's got preservatives and flavorings and things, but I think for the purpose, we can just assume it's basically like water. So let's just say, so just over half of the blood is kind of water. It's plasma. And plasma has lots of proteins in it, clotting factors and nutrients and hormones and things like that. But essentially, it's water. So plasma is a liquid. And then, of course, the main component that we're thinking about today, which is, 40% of your blood, is red cells. Yeah. And your red cells are responsible for delivering oxygen to your tissues. And this is the important thing to think about when we're talking about replacing blood, because that's the thing that kills you. So to just answer the question, get it out of the way, if your blood was replaced by Kool-Aid, you would die within minutes, because that is effectively, you're not going to deliver any oxygen to your tissues. You might say, well, oxygen can be dissolved in water, like fish can extract, breathe. Well, I don't know if you call it breathing, but they can have some respiration.
Respirate,
from the oxygen in water, but it is many orders of magnitude less than the amount of oxygen that can be dissolved in a similar volume of blood. I mean, millions. So that's never going to work. Water just simply cannot dissolve enough oxygen in it, even if you tried to, hypersaturate it with oxygen as much as possible.
Yeah, I was thinking like if you got it into one of those, we have soda streams where you like can make your own bubbly water at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think introducing bubbles into the bloodstream is
probably not great.
Absolutely, adding just fuel to this fire. That's probably the worst thing you can do.
But what would it feel like if all of your blood was bubbly?
I think it was spectacularly painful.
Oh, I thought it'd be tingly.
I think that would be one of the worst ways to die. I think honestly,
no.
And we know, so this is all informed by medical experience here, because introducing bubbles into the bloodstream is a complication that occurs sometimes, and it is bad news. It is very bad news. It is the absolute enemy of anyone doing vascular procedures. So because
not tingly, then definitely not tingly.
I mean, tremendous pain. But I mean, the way it kills is because it stops oxygen reaching the tissue. So it's very much what we're discussing. And of course, we have an analogous situation for oxygen not being delivered to tissue, which is cardiac arrest. So we know exactly what happens to tissues when the oxygen stops arriving, and it happens very quickly. So, some tissue is more tolerant than others, but of course, in a cardiac arrest, the two tissues that we really worry about, the brain and the heart, because they are very intolerant to hypoxia, meaning lack of oxygen. And depending on your pre-morbid state or your age and things like that, irreparable damage occurs within minutes to the heart and the brain. And the brain, much as it pains me to say as a heart doctor, that's really the one we're thinking about. That's the one that determines mortality and survival and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was what would happen if you replace it with Kool-Aid. But the question went on to say, what other liquids might be better than Kool-Aid? I mean, I think it's a low bar. Kool-Aid is
100% death within minutes. Can you do better than that?
Can you do it? Can you get at least a quarter of
5,
an hour,
10,
or something?
Come on,
something like that. So I think we can.
Oh,
it's never been done to replace an entire circulating blood volume. All the trials that have been done, which are quite small, and that's a theme we'll get to. That all the things we're going to talk about are very small numbers of. Sometimes humans, sometimes not even humans, that we've got this from. So it's small volumes that have been infused. So let's not get carried away and say that this is fact, but it's hypothetical. It's hypothetical.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is the subject of synthetic blood or artificial blood. But actually, as we've suggested earlier, it's not blood we're replacing, because we can never replace all the functions of blood. It's simply too complex. What we're trying to replace is oxygen carrying ability. That's what we're trying to achieve.
The red blood cell part of your blood.
The red blood cell part. We can't do all the other stuff, all the nutrient delivery and hormones and signaling molecules and immune system. We can't do that. But maybe we can offer some better ways of delivering oxygen. So why do we need to work on this? And it's something that we've been trying to work on if we discount the beer and the milk and the wine. I mean, infusing wine or beer, that just reminds me of, Barney from The Simpsons. Just hook it up to my veins, So some people have actually tried that. And I'm sure
my God.
They got drunk very quickly.
In every episode that we do a fake English accent, we've never had someone do a fake American accent. This is the best.
It was a Barney accent. I mean,
that's true.
That
was Barney, not really American. Yeah, I get it.
I mean, it wasn't a great Barney impression.
You did good. It was I'm proud of it.
If you actually infused like ethanol or even water into your blood, you'd pop your red blood cells. So that's I'm just by the by.
Don't do that.
So this is a complete replacement. But if you mixed the Kool-Aid that's bad, because the red blood cells through osmosis would swell and pop. So that's why we infuse saline. So saline solution we don't infuse water ever, because then it's the osmotic pressure is not there. The osmolality of the infused solution is such that your blood cells don't get any injury
because of how salt works. Right, it's like helping things move in and out of. So what you're saying is because water doesn't have any salt in it, all of the water is going to move into the blood.
Into the red blood cells, exactly,
and pop them. Oh, because I was going to ask. You said plasma is essentially water, so it's like, could we just replace the plasma with Kool-Aid? And the answer is no, unless it's very salty Kool-Aid.
Yeah, well, you're right. So plasma expanders are used. That's what we do in resuscitation. That's what we're doing when we give intravenous fluid. And this is if you ever want to, have the most boring conversation of your life, talk to an intensive care doctor or an anesthetist about intravenous fluid choices, because my God, they think about this stuff so much. And there are lots of different types of fluid, but they all variations on a theme, which is, salts, sometimes it's not just sodium chloride, but potassium and lactate and things like that. Try to offer a more physiological reflection of plasma. So you're absolutely right that we can try but what that's doing is just trying to expand your blood volume, but it's not increasing your red blood cell count. In fact, it's diluting it. But it can allow better blood pressure. So you give intravenous fluid when somebody is obviously dehydrated, when their blood pressure is low. Because if your blood pressure is low, it doesn't really matter what your hemoglobin level is, because if you're not actually perfusing your tissues because your blood pressure is too low, then you're gonna die. So that's why intravenous fluid still has a benefit, even if it's not increasing the amount of oxygen carrying capability, it's increasing the blood pressure. So
cool. Didn't know that.
Yeah. So we can certainly try to expand the plasma volume, but we want to also, in this case, expand the oxygen carrying capability. So that's kind of a semantic point about whether we call it a synthetic blood or a oxygen therapy agent or something like that. But let me just tell you a little fact that I didn't know until I looked this up about the red blood cells. The bone marrow produces at the rate of 2 million red blood cells per second.
That's a lot of cells.
That's a lot of cells. And one thing I did know is that they last 120 days. That's the life cycle of a red blood cell. But
that seems like a long time.
Well, if you think about it like this, that blood transfusions, if you donated blood, and let me take this opportunity to suggest to listeners, please do. You are literally saving a life. There is a worldwide blood shortage. We simply do not have enough donors. And so there's always a need for blood transfusion. But that is, of course, part of the reason why these efforts take place. So why we're trying to figure out blood substitutes, because blood transfusions simply can't keep up with demand, especially in resource poor areas of the world. And you were saying about the life expectancy of red blood cells. Of course, that's a big problem. The average blood transfusion has got a shelf life, even cooled, of about 30 to 40 days. And then you've got to chuck it away, if it's not used. So short shelf life is a big problem. Shortage of donors is a big problem. There are risks from transfusions. They're much, much smaller than they used to be. But we just, a couple of months ago in the UK, there was a big scandal from the 90s of people transfused with HIV positive blood, and these horrible kind of stories like that has been massively reduced, the risks of bloodborne diseases, because there's much better screening these days. But there are still risks from having a blood transfusion. You've got to match the blood, of course, and mismatches are very rare, but they are very serious when they happen. And even if you have matched blood, you can have reaction to them. You can have a nasty thing, which I've seen on a few occasions, transfusion-related acute lung injury, where you kind of fluid in your lungs, and you can, if you have a lot of transfusion, you can get iron overload from all the excess iron you're getting, all these kinds of things. So blood transfusions are not free of risk, and we don't have enough. So this is what's kind of guided the efforts to replace blood. So the modern era of kind of maybe reasonable approaches that aren't beer or wine. Do you remember the movie The Abyss?
Yeah, the underwater movie with the water snake thing.
Yeah, cutting edge CGI for the time. Very impressive. But there was a scene in the movie of a mouse that was breathing underwater.
Yeah. Breathing the oxygenated water that you would fill. That they filled the helmets with for the film.
You remember the movie well. Yeah. So exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a real concept. That was not fake. Those mice were really breathing, and what they're breathing is this perfluorocarbon based liquid. This is the approach, the perfluorocarbon based blood replacement. So this is one of the approaches. And PFCs for short, they're synthetic molecules which are composed of carbon and fluorine atoms, and the carbon fluorine bond, and this is chemistry, and I'm not a chemist, but it's a very, very strong bond. So that makes them quite inert in the body. They're not going to mess around with your insides.
Yeah, fluorine generally you wouldn't want it in your body if you can help it, but
if
carbon
it's
fluorine mix,
bound, it's
good. We're good.
Stable, and so it doesn't have chemical degradation and stuff like that. And my understanding of it is basically there's a very strong intramolecular bond, but very weak intermolecular bond. So this allows them to behave almost like a gas, and then they can easily dissolve other substances which, have a sort of low cohesivity, like oxygen. So you can dissolve large amounts of oxygen in the PFC fluid. The one issue is that they require an emulsifier because they're non-polar. Chemists, don't write in angrily if I get anything wrong here, but you require emulsifying agent, otherwise it separates out from the blood.
Like a roux, like a good roux. You need to make sure it's an emulsion or you're just in trouble, an aioli. Exactly.
Yeah. And if you see the video that I found explaining this online, it really did look like a tasty ragu, actually. Like it was lovely. I wanted to drink it, but that's what the approach was. It was about liquid breathing, and this is, mice have done it and survived, but they have very small lungs that you can empty quickly. The big problem, and again, coming back to intensive care, it has been an area of interest for intensive care, liquid breathing, but it's emptying the lungs that is the big problem. After the therapy is concluded. But that's breathing. However, the same fluid can be infused into the blood because it has oxygen carrying capabilities. So this was investigated, and it was first trialed over 30 years ago. And that first product had about 1/3 the oxygen carrying capability of blood. So,
okay,
not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah, not bad. And then I found a little nice review article going through all the different clinical trials of several other products, and they all kind of had a side column saying discontinued due to side effects, discontinued due to cost, discontinued due to horrific side effects. So
no. Horrific side effects is not. Great band, not what you want to see on your chart.
No, the good thrash metal, but So I think from my kind of understanding is this is not a avenue that is actively being pursued at the moment, because I think it's just been plagued with so many issues. The advantages were it's got a very long shelf life, years. Because it is so stable. So that's a big selling point. And of course, there is no blood group matching and things like that. But it has these side effects, and it requires essentially inhalation of pure oxygen because the oxygen carrying capability is low. And also it releases the oxygen too quickly. So it doesn't, to get the oxygen, sufficient oxygen to your destination tissue, you actually have to hyperoxygenate the patient. So it's not great. But I do like the idea of having kind of clear, colorless blood. All right. So then the next subcategory is hemoglobin-based approaches.
Okay.
Now, hemoglobin, of course, everybody has heard of. It's a protein. It's a very clever protein. It's essentially in almost all vertebrates. There's one fish that doesn't have it. I forget the name.
Do you think that fish feels left out?
I think the fish feels like it's a cut above the rest of us. It's like,
that fish is an X-Man or something, and we're all just...
I wish I knew what molecule it used, but, that would make this more complete. But, it probably looks at our heme groups and our alpha and beta subunits and things.
It's like when a patient shoves mucus in your face, and that fish is just like, ugh, you guys are so gross.
Hemoglobin.
But pennies. Stop. Get away.
But mollusks use copper as their metal in the cyanoglobin. And so that raises the interesting possibility that maybe one of the blood substitutes we come up with in the future may be like blue. And that would be cool as well. I think I'm just getting a bit too distracted by the colors of the blood here rather than actually the substance. But yes, hemoglobin, very clever. And it is, it's got these heme groups, 4 heme groups, which are themselves, they're made up of porphyrin rings with a central iron atom. And this is those, transition metals. There's too much chemistry here. But because, of course, they can bond to oxygen. And there are very clever properties of hemoglobin where there's a shape change to the hemoglobin molecule when oxygen binds to it, which then progressively increases the affinity of the hemoglobin for additional oxygen molecules. And so this is called cooperative bonding. So it's a really fascinating thing, but it maintains these properties, some of them, there's a bit of nuance to this, outside of a red blood cell. So you can just use hemoglobin. You can just try and inject hemoglobin, and this has been isolated from other animals and from human donors and things like that. But the big problem with that is while it maintains its ability to transport oxygen outside of the red blood cell, it doesn't maintain the regulatory properties of sort of releasing it at the right time, which is done by another compound called 2,3-DPG, which is inside red blood cells. So it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that ability. So it's just kind of like it's less physiologically useful, but more importantly, is it's quite toxic. So unencapsulated hemoglobin in the bloodstream causes a few problems. The main one is it does something quite cool called nitric oxide scavenging. So nitric oxide is important in vasodilation. So this is opening up the blood vessel. So nitric oxide is released and dilates your blood vessels. And if you scavenge the nitric oxide, it causes profound vasoconstriction. So you're experiencing vasodilation to experience the opposite of vasoconstriction. So there you go. We got one experiencing.
Hey, that's
opposite.
an opposite. Yeah, there you go.
It's linking back. It's all about the callbacks. So this is a big problem because it causes very severe vasoconstriction, spikes your blood pressure up, not good. And it can also be quite toxic as well itself. It's got, sort of, it's redox.
So many toxics.
This is what chemistry is. The chemistry is just little things that are going to mess you up. It's a vicious field. It's vicious. Okay, I'm annoying all the chemists today. So you can infuse it, like this, but that causes those kind of problems. Adverse events has led to clinical trials all being kind of terminated early. Vasoconstriction, which, then reduces oxygenation. So that's obviously very bad and causes your blood pressure to go very high. And so there are different approaches. Some have tried to use polyethylene glycol to stabilize the hemoglobin. So this is sort of changing the preparation. But there's also ways to try and encapsulate it. So this is maybe one of the more promising ones. There's a product called erythromer, which is a membrane around hemoglobin molecules within the hemoglobin proteins within this synthetic membrane, which prevents nitric oxide getting inside. So it doesn't hoover up all the nitric oxide as much. It's still a little bit, but not as much. And it doesn't cause all that toxicity. So this has been around for a while, but recently in the last couple of years, the US military is throwing their weight behind it with all their resources and money. So this seems to be quite an interesting avenue potentially. And some of these second generation hemoglobin-based oxygen-carrying blood substitutes, whatever you want to call them, have actually been given in human patients. So in the US, there is a compassionate use license under the FDA to give to people, for example, like Jehovah's Witnesses who refuse blood products. Yeah. If there's no other option, you can give one of these products. In South Africa, one was licensed some years ago because of very high rates of HIV/AIDS and the dangers inherent to giving blood transfusions. This is going back about 20 years. But so they have been used in human patients and continue to be available in a few countries. But maybe this next generation is going to be promising. But then there's an interesting trial going on here in the UK, which is quite exciting, involving quite a few centers, which is underway at present. So we've talked about trying to synthesize some liquids that may be able to replicate oxygen carrying capabilities. Yeah. But just like I was saying, there are analogies to synthetic organs not being really ever as good. And now we've recently entered the era of genetically engineered or cloned. We were able to sort of manipulate living replacements. So this clearly seems to be a promising avenue. The more basic version is stem cell. So, embryonic umbilical cord stem cells being used to farm, PHARM.
Oh,
that's the
got
callback.
That callback.
There you go.
Take it off the board. We've took that pin out.
To farm blood. And apparently you can, get 20 units of blood from an umbilical cord sample. And so this is not new. This has, again, been around for a few years. But the trial going on now in the UK is called the Restore trial, is looking at lab-grown red cells as a way. They're infusing tiny amounts at the moment. It's like 2 teaspoonfuls, but human patients are being recruited, and it's in progress at the moment. So this is I think from my perspective, if you look at the way that we've been trying to develop an artificial heart for 60 years, but now we are finally getting a bit of progress with genetically engineered donor organs, xenotransplants from pigs and things like that.
Yeah.
I feel like this seems to be a promising avenue for addressing the shortage of blood transfusion. If we can really start growing red cells in the lab, then I think that's going to be the most promising way forward. So those seem to be the main approaches that I've encountered so far. There's some more kind of wishy-washy, slightly futuristic stuff like nano. As soon as I start reading about nanotechnology, I feel like, I don't know. I think this is just trying to look for a grant application.
Quantum in there, and
So but clearly, these different approaches get around a lot of the problems that we currently have with needing to match samples to blood groups, having short shelf lives, and just a general shortage. So I think it's an exciting field. There's promise there, but we are maybe not quite at the true blood blade synthetic, because you've noticed in a lot of these vampire movies and stories, there's synthetic blood all over the place. Where does that come from? It's just like, okay, we've done it. I mean, I tried to look up, like,
they licked it, they got it. I mean, metaphorically and physically, I guess.
I tried to look up blade serum, like what it's actually made of, but the Blade wiki was not particularly scientific, so I was disappointed there.
Well, I know this podcast where if you ask them, they'll try and find it for you.
Well, feel free. I might submit my own question. I don't know if the listeners know about the question bank. It's so impressive. You have some very creative listeners and some really cool questions there.
We think so too. We're excited. We have a poll now on our Patreon where people can expose like 5 questions and people pick which one they like. So we've got a couple polls we're going to post another one today while we're recording this.
Yeah, so sign up to the
poll
Patreon.
People again. It's so fun. Yeah, there's some good questions. Okay, sorry, but we got off topic. You were talking about Blade and serum, and
I'm frequently talking about Blade. It's one of my favorite topics. I'm a Blade stan. But yeah, I think that's kind of summarizes that wraps up most of my completely discombobulated notes here. Can you be combobulated? Or, I don't know. So
maybe I don't think I've ever experienced it, but I can understand the concept. I don't think I'm usually on the dis side, or even maybe neutral. So I'm neutral bobulated. I don't think I've ever been. If I could feel combobulated, that would probably be the best day, I can imagine.
So Allyson, if you replaced all of your blood with Kool-Aid, you would die within minutes. Yeah. And it wouldn't be nice. I don't think it would be. How would it feel?
It'd be like suffocating, right? But
I think you just pass out first. Actually, I think because if we're saying it's analogous to like your heart stopping, you probably just pass, because the first thing to go is your brain. So
and your brain would be like, I'm calling for oxygen and getting no oxygen, so I'm going to stop working down now. Yeah,
which is of course why fainting happens. Yeah. So I think probably it wouldn't be so bad. You just pass out and then expire. But there are this is beside the point. It's on my notes and I haven't said it yet. There's so many flavors of Kool-Aid. I had no idea. I thought it was just like 3. But there's like 50.
Oh no, this is America.
And there's a whole brand direction towards the Latino market. Kool-Aid decided some years ago. Yeah, go look it up. Kool-Aid apportioned a large amount of their promotional budget to appealing to the Latino audience.
Huh. I'm going to look this up. Yeah, here we are. 2011. Kraft aims Kool-Aid ads at growing Hispanic market. 20% of Kool-Aid drinkers are Hispanic. No wonder I drank so much Kool-Aid growing up.
20%?
I had no idea. Man, we had so much Kool-Aid. Wow, that's so funny. Weird.
Well, and ironically, the Jonestown Massacre apparently wasn't Kool-Aid at all. It was a cheap knockoff product called like Fruit Aid or something.
But, if you're going to have a cult where you kill everyone, buy the brand name. That's the lesson to take away from this.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't think anyone would be complaining afterwards. So you can save the money.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So I'm a big fan of blood, and I think it is a very fascinating tissue. It causes me a lot of sleepless nights from clotting, but I'm excited that maybe within a decade we might have a viable fluid that would allow Allyson's hypothetical to at least get the person to see out an hour. Let's say an hour.
Oh, wow. An hour would be great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not? Well, thank you for sending in your question, Allyson. And Rohin, thank you for answering that question. I had seen it in our database and was like, that one seems complicated. So that's good. I'm glad that you tackled that one.
You filed it under horror.
We did, because it seemed horrifying to imagine. Yeah. And yeah, well,
the horrifying thought was the bubbles. That's
definitely
soda blood. Bad.
No, thank you. I'd never even thought about it that way, but now it's all I'm going to think about. That's going to be the thought that I can't banish while I'm trying to sleep.
Don't repress it. Don't repress it. It'll come back.
I'll accept it. Think about it. Oh, God. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of That's Absurd, Please Elaborate. I hope you learned something. I definitely did. Rohin, where can people come and find you if they want to learn more about blood or maybe Blade the movie or some other things that you care about?
I'm on YouTube. I'm not very active at the moment, but I'm hoping to come back with a very long video soon, like H-Bomber guy, ridiculous long thing.
Oh, wow. That's a long one.
Yeah, maybe not that length, not that quality either. Just keep your expectations low. But YouTube and Nebula as well, of course. And
yes.
Those are my main places these days. I'm not really on social media as much and finding it less enjoyable than I once did. So I'm hoping to make a glorious return to YouTube. Please join me there.
And if you haven't watched his videos while you wait for him to make one, he's got lots of videos out there that are super good. So go watch them and check out his back catalog. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
No, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, listener, for listening to this episode of That's Absurd, Please Elaborate. The show was written and created and produced by me, Trace Dominguez, and also my co-host, Julian Huguet. This episode, of course, partially written by Rohin Francis. It was also produced and edited by the wonderful and hopefully not bubbly-blooded Kyle Sisk. Special thanks to the listeners who submitted questions for this episode. That would be Allyson and Buena. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the form in the show notes. You can email us at hello@that'sabsurdshow.com. You can visit our website, that'sabsurdshow.com/ask, or of course, call us like Buena did at 302-TAPE-SHOW and leave a voicemail. That's TAPESHO. Special thanks to our newest Patreon subscribers, which are Derek and Erica. Thank you for joining at our clever colleague level. And of course, our shout out to our absurd administrators, Lee and Les. Leave us a review wherever you are listening right now. You can leave us a star or a heart or a thumbs up or follow the show. And please send us a question. If you're, in the shower or, going to the bathroom or driving down the road, please wait till you stop driving down the road. Leave us a question at any of those places. We could not do this show without your questions. And a special thanks to those who have joined the Patreon already and submitted those questions and voted on those polls. We've got another polled question coming out soon and another poll on the Patreon as of today that we're recording this at the end of September. Of course, a special thanks to those who are currently listening on Nebula. By listening, you are supporting the show and supporting amazing people like Rohin here who makes content for Nebula as well. If you want to join, go down into the show notes. Visit go.nebula.tv/that'sabsurdshow. And as we say at the end of every episode, Rohin, go see Cinderblock Paint Store and Heidenberg Postulate because they're a great band.
It's just very deep lyrics. Yeah. And now you've experienced listening to this wonderful podcast. You can now experience the opposite of stopping it because that's the end.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time with another episode.
Bye.